I lived with Leon in Sky Hill for 9 or 10 months. I don't think it was a whole year, but it felt like 10.
Have you ever wondered what it was really like to be the woman who inspired one of rock's most famous songs? Rita Coolidge was that woman, the Delta lady who drove across the country with Leon Russell, cooked beans in his studio, and unknowingly became his muse.
Leon decided, because I wasn't ready to get married, and so I think that somewhere in Leon's heart he thought if we had the way some people would get a puppy, he wanted a monkey.
But the real story of their relationship was far more complicated than the romantic image people imagined. In her interview, she revealed her relationship with Leon Russell, and the secrets she uncovered shocked many fans.
Leon is a massive talent. Just his history and the music that he grew up listening to, and the struggles that he overcame to be a musician and to be in the spotlight, I think were tremendous, because deep inside, Leon always battled with being kind of an introvert and kind of live in seclusion, or to be the ringmaster. There was no in between.
This is the true story of Rita Coolidge and her boyfriend, Leon Russell, the man who wrote a song about her but never really saw who she truly was.
Leon and I broke up, and it was years later. Connie Nelson and I went to see Leon play I think it was the Belly up in San Diego, and that's probably been 25, 30 years. And he was on his bus, and we got there late and had to sit on the side behind Leon's wall of monitors because he was almost deaf by then.
Rita Coolidge's story starts in Memphis, Tennessee, where she was born in 1945. Her family was the kind that valued both education and music, and growing up, Rita was surrounded by the rich sounds of gospel, blues, and country that made Memphis such a special place for music. She also had Cherokee heritage, something that would become a big part of who she was and how people saw her later on. Her voice was something special, and it was clear from early on that she had a gift. That voice would eventually take her far away from Memphis, first to Florida State University where she studied art, and then to Los Angeles in the late 1960s, where the music scene was exploding with creativity and chaos. It was in L.A. that Rita met Leon Russell, and meeting him changed everything. Leon was already a big deal in the music world. He had started out as Claude Russell Bridges in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but he changed his name and became one of the most sought-after session musicians and producers around. He had worked with everyone from the Byrds to Herb Alpert, and he was connected to just about everyone who mattered in the LA music scene. When Rita decided to drive out to California from Memphis in 1968, she didn't go alone. She went with Leon in a blue Thunderbird convertible on a road trip that would turn out to be one of the strangest journeys of her life. The thing about Leon was that he was incredibly focused, almost to the point of being odd. He never got out of the car once during the entire drive across the country. Not once. So Rita had to handle all the practical stuff like gas stations and rest stops, while Leon just sat there, lost in his own world, probably thinking about music and ideas that only he could understand. When they finally made it to California, they ended up at Sky Hill Drive, which was Leon's home and recording studio in the Hollywood Hills. This place became Rita's new world. She sort of fell into the role of the woman of the house, as she later put it. That meant she was making endless pitchers of iced tea and cooking pots of beans while musicians drifted in and out all day and night. It was a busy, crowded, chaotic household, but Rita kept things running. She was the calm in the middle of all that creative storm. It was in that kitchen, making tea and taking care of people, that Rita first encountered Joe Cocker. Leon had brought Joe to the studio to record what would become his breakthrough album. Joe was this British singer with a raw, raspy voice that people either loved or hated, but there was no denying his passion. During those sessions, Leon played Joe a song he had written. It was a beautiful, soulful tune called Delta Lady, and it was about Rita. The lyrics were full of poetic images that painted her as this southern beauty, this graceful, captivating woman. When Joe recorded it, he put everything he had into it. The problem was, Rita had no idea Leon was writing a song about her until she heard the finished record. She had been in the kitchen the whole time, making tea, while history was being made just a few feet away. When Rita finally heard Delta Lady, she was flattered by the beautiful words, but she also had to laugh at some of it. There's a line in the song about her standing wet and naked in the garden, and Rita would later say, very clearly, and with her typical honesty, that she never did any such thing. That was just Leon's fantasy, one of many he had about her. He saw her as this mythical figure, this muse who existed to inspire his art. And to be fair, she did inspire him. But that fantasy version of her wasn't the real Rita. And that disconnect would become a theme in their relationship. The success of Delta Lady was huge. It put both Leon and Joe Cocker in the spotlight, and it led directly to one of the most legendary tours in rock history. The 1970 Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour with Joe Cocker. Leon, who was actually a very private, introverted person who hated being in the spotlight, somehow agreed to put together and lead the massive band that would back Joe on this tour. It was a crazy undertaking. He brought together an enormous group of musicians, singers, and all kinds of hangers-on, including a lot of people from Delaney and Bonnie's band. Rita was naturally part of it all, serving as one of the featured vocalists alongside other talented women like Claudia Lanier. The tour itself was a gigantic spectacle. It was like a traveling circus, with music, drugs, and complete chaos everywhere you looked. There were dozens of people on the tour, including a choir, a horn section, and just a never-ending parade of characters that Leon had gathered from all over. For Rita, who had just graduated from college and was still pretty naive about the rock and roll world, it was a shocking introduction to the excess and madness of it all. She was only 22 years old, and suddenly she was in the middle of this whirlwind. On the tour, Rita found herself sitting next to Joe Cocker on the plane night after night. She watched him struggle with his own demons and with the enormous pressure of being the center of this chaotic tour. It was on one of those flights that she leaned over to Joe and quietly told him she didn't think she could do this anymore. She was losing weight, her health was declining, and the stress was just too much. Joe looked at her with this desperate sincerity and told her she couldn't leave because she was the only friend he had. That was a heavy burden for a young woman to carry, but Rita stayed. She felt like Joe was telling her the truth, and she couldn't abandon him. After the tour, Rita found herself navigating the tricky waters of the LA music scene, where romance and professional collaboration were often tangled up together. The talented, charismatic men around her seemed to see her as both a prize to be won and a source of creative inspiration. It was during this time that she got involved with Stephen Stills, the brilliant but volatile guitarist and singer-songwriter who had made his name with Buffalo Springfield and Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Stephen was one of the most sought-after musicians of the era. He was incredibly talented, but he also had a huge ego and a penchant for drama. His relationship with Rita was a classic rock and roll love story, full of jealousy, manipulation, and songs written about her. The way they got together was a perfect example of the kind of maneuvering that went on in Hollywood at the time. Rita had actually been interested in Stephen's bandmate, Graham Nash. Graham was this gentle, English-born singer who had joined Crosby, Stills, and Nash after leaving the Hollies. Rita had arranged to go out with Graham, but when she called his house to confirm their plans, Stephen answered the phone. He coolly informed her that Graham had changed his mind and wasn't interested anymore. That was a complete lie, of course. Stephen quickly stepped in and took Rita out himself, beginning a relationship that would be intense, passionate, and ultimately destructive. Graham only found out later that Stephen had sabotaged his plans, and Rita found herself caught in the middle of a rivalry between two of the biggest stars in music. It was a position that would become something of a pattern for her. Stephen was so taken with Rita that he wrote the song Cherokee about her. It celebrated her Native American heritage and her beauty. But the relationship was full of insecurity and anger on his part. When Rita eventually ended things with him, Stephen's reaction was typically dramatic and alarming. He wrote "Love Rita" on the bathroom mirror of a motel room and then downed a handful of pills. That landed him in the hospital. When Rita heard about it, she wasn't exactly surprised. In her words, Stephen was always about drama. He was the kind of man who wore his heart on his sleeve and expressed his emotions in the most extreme ways possible. Being involved with him meant living in a constant state of high tension. But even as she pulled away from Stephen, Rita was still drawn to Graham Nash, the man she had been interested in from the start. Graham was different from Stephen. He was more gentle and thoughtful, and he and Rita began a relationship that seemed to offer the promise of something more stable and loving. It seemed like it could be a real, genuine connection. But there was a shadow looming over the whole situation. David Crosby. Crosby was Graham's bandmate, a man of immense talent and an even more immense ego. For reasons that were never entirely clear, Crosby disliked Rita intensely from the moment he met her. His hostility toward her became a constant source of tension in her relationship with Graham. Crosby's behavior was extreme. He actually accused Rita of putting Quaaludes into a pot of beans she cooked for the band. It was a bizarre and completely baseless accusation, and it showed just how much he hated her. He called her the devil and seemed to blame her for everything that went wrong in the band's dynamic. He even went so far as to maintain, to this day, that Rita was the reason Crosby, Stills, and Nash eventually broke up. That was a heavy burden for Rita to carry, being accused of destroying one of the most beloved supergroups of the era. But she always maintained that the problems in that group existed long before she came into the scene. The egos, the drugs, and the creative tensions had been building for years. Her presence was just a convenient excuse for the band's dysfunction, not the actual cause of it. Despite all this drama, Rita's relationship with Graham was a source of genuine happiness for her. It was a respite from the chaos that surrounded her life in the music industry. They collaborated on music and enjoyed a real creative partnership. But ultimately, the intensity of the situation, combined with Crosby's relentless hostility, proved too much for the relationship to survive. Rita found herself single once again, searching for someone who could love her without all the constant drama and manipulation that seemed to come with dating rock stars. The most complicated and tragic relationship of Rita's young adult life was with Jim Gordon. Jim was a supremely talented drummer who had worked with some of the biggest names in music, including Eric Clapton. His story would ultimately take a dark and terrifying turn, but when Rita met him, he was just another talented musician in Leon Russell's orbit. They began a creative and romantic partnership that produced music that would become legendary, at least according to Rita's account of what happened. Here's the story as Rita tells it. In 1969, Rita and Jim were working together on a piano progression that Rita had composed. Together, they wrote lyrics for a song they called "Time, Don't Let the World Get in Our Way." Rita contributed what she called a counter-melody to the piano part. It was a crucial element that helped shape the song's distinctive sound. They recorded a demo of the track together, but for reasons that remain unclear, they never released it or did anything else with the song. Then, in 1970, Rita was driving in her car, listening to the radio, when she heard a familiar progression. It made her heart stop. It was Layla, Eric Clapton's iconic, unforgettable masterpiece. And the piano part that formed the backbone of the song was unmistakably hers. She was devastated. Not only because her work had been taken without her permission, but because the man who had taken it was Jim Gordon, her boyfriend at the time. He had apparently reworked the tune and played it for Clapton without ever mentioning her involvement. According to Rita, Jim took the piano progression she wrote and the counter-melody she created, reshaped the lyrics to fit a different theme, and presented it to Clapton as his own work. She had no idea any of this was happening. The song went on to become one of the biggest rock songs in history, a timeless classic that has been covered countless times. Rita received absolutely no credit for her contribution, and she said nothing about it publicly for decades because she was terrified of Jim's temper. Jim Gordon was a man with a reputation for volatility, and Rita had good reason to be afraid of him. Their relationship had become increasingly abusive. Jim had physically assaulted her on at least one occasion, punching her in the eye while they were on tour together. It was a violent, terrifying experience that left Rita with both physical and emotional scars. It made her deeply cautious about challenging him or revealing the truth about his betrayal. The story of Layla has always been told as Eric Clapton's unrequited love song for Pattie Boyd, the wife of his friend George Harrison. It was indeed inspired by Clapton's intense, impossible feelings for her. But the music itself, the iconic piano riff that gives the song its distinctive character, came from somewhere else entirely, at least according to Rita. And she has never wavered in her claim that she was the true composer of that crucial element. Tragically, Jim Gordon's story would become even more horrifying in the years that followed. He had always been troubled, battling mental health issues that were worsened by his heavy drug use and the chaotic lifestyle of the music industry. In 1983, his mental illness reached a catastrophic peak. He brutally murdered his own mother, beating her to death with a hammer in a psychotic episode. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity and was committed to a psychiatric prison, where he remains to this day. It's a chilling end to a story that began with so much musical promise, and it's impossible to hear the story of Layla without thinking of the toll that mental illness and violence took on everyone involved. For Rita, the entire experience was a profound betrayal. It wasn't just the theft of her musical work. It was the physical abuse she suffered at the hands of someone she loved and trusted. It was a lesson in the dark side of the music industry, a reminder that creative genius and personal demons often went hand in hand. And it was a reminder that women in the industry were frequently the ones who bore the brunt of the damage. Rita has spent the rest of her life trying to reclaim her contribution to Layla, insisting that she wrote that crucial piano part and the counter-melody. She wants history to remember her role in creating one of the greatest songs ever written. But the music industry, like so many institutions of that era, was dominated by men who controlled the narrative. And Rita's voice was often silenced, whether by fear, by the patriarchy of the record labels, or by the sheer weight of the myth that had already grown up around Layla, the marriage to Chris Christopherson and the price of fame. By the mid-1970s, Rita Coolidge had become one of the most recognizable voices in popular music. She was a Grammy-winning artist with a string of hits that defined the era's soft rock sound. She had emerged from the chaos of her early days with a clarity of purpose that had been hard-won through pain and disappointment. She was ready for a new chapter in her life. That chapter began when she met Kris Kristofferson. Kris was a brilliant, brooding singer-songwriter who had already written some of the most iconic country songs of all time, including Me and Bobby McGee and Sunday Mornin' Comin' Down. He was a man of contradictions. He was a Rhodes Scholar and a former Army captain who had turned his back on a promising military career to pursue music in Nashville. He was a deeply intelligent and sensitive artist, but he was also a heavy drinker and a complex, sometimes difficult person. He and Rita connected immediately. Their chemistry was palpable both on stage and off. They quickly became one of the most celebrated couples in the music world. Their duets, including the Grammy-winning A Song I'd Like to Sing, showcased their remarkable vocal harmony and seemed to suggest a partnership that was both romantic and creatively fulfilling. They married in 1973. For a time, they were the golden couple of the country rock scene, gracing magazine covers and performing together to sold-out crowds around the world. But the reality of their marriage was far more complicated than the public image suggested. Kris was a heavy drinker, and his alcoholism created enormous strain in their relationship. His behavior could be erratic and sometimes frightening. Rita has described him as controlling, a man who questioned her about everything and who seemed to need to dominate their partnership even as she was achieving her own considerable success. The fame that came with Kris's breakthrough movie role in A Star is Born in 1976 only made things worse. His ego swelled, and his drinking intensified. Rita was left to deal with the fallout of his increasingly volatile behavior. The most alarming incident occurred when Kris, in a drunken stupor, punched Rita. It was an act of violence that shocked her to her core. He later apologized profusely and claimed not to remember the incident at all. That was a testament to the depths of his alcoholism. But the damage had been done. Rita realized that her marriage was not the fairy tale it appeared to be. She was trapped in a relationship with a man whose demons were consuming him and taking her down with him. The marriage finally ended in 1979. But unlike many of her other breakups, this one didn't result in complete estrangement. Rita and Kris have maintained a relationship over the years. It's a bond that has survived the pain of their divorce and the passage of time. Rita has said that they still share a connection that is beyond any kind of understanding. It's a deep and abiding bond that allows them to laugh at things nobody else gets and to support each other even after all these years. It's a testament to the complexity of their relationship, to the genuine love that once existed between them and that somehow survived the destructive forces that tore them apart. They have occasionally performed together in the years since their divorce. Rita has not ruled out the possibility of reuniting with Kris on stage again someday. She has said that there are still people who would be happy if they came out in wheelchairs just to sing one more time. That's the kind of perspective that comes with age and experience. It's the realization that relationships are rarely simple and that love can endure even when marriage cannot. For Rita, the marriage to Kris was both a high point and a low point in her life. It was a period of immense professional success and personal turmoil that taught her about her own strength and resilience. She emerged from it a survivor, a woman who had been through the fire and come out the other side with her voice and her spirit intact. So that was the life of Rita Coolidge, a journey through love, music, heartbreak, and triumph. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the incredible story of the Delta Lady and the legendary men who walked through her life, please leave a comment below and let us know what you thought. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories from the golden age of rock and roll.